Hello, students. Good morning to all of you. Today, I am going to teach you what is democracy, why democracy. As we know, democracy is the best form of government in world today. For your clear understanding, we should go for some definitions given by some political philosophers in the world. For your clear understanding and simple understanding of democracy, we should focus on some important definitions given by Shelley and Abraham Lincoln and some others. Now we'll go for some definitions that democracy has been variously defined. Etymologically, the term democracy is derived from the Greek word demos, which means people, and that kratia, which means power. Thus, democracy means the power of the people. From the very beginning, I was talking that democracy is nothing but the power of the people. According to Shelley, the great British political philosopher defined democracy is a government in which everyone has a share. That's why, if you go one step ahead, then another famous definition is coming to us for our clear understanding. That is, one of the best definitions is that of the 16th US President Abraham Lincoln defined democracy as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. My dear students, you might be knowing that how this definition is clearly says that what is democracy and for what democracy stands for. That's why this simple definition given by Abraham Lincoln is very famous to understand the topic democracy clearly. Then, democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. My dear students, you know that election is the main basis of selection of leaders in a democratic form of government. Another thing, if you'll go further, then a democratic government rules within the limits set by the constitutional law and citizens' rights. That you know that constitutional law and citizens' right must be followed in a democratic government. Then after going through this chapter, you would be able to find the difference between a democratic form of government and a non-democratic form of government. Because we should know, my dear students, that what is the difference between a democratic form of government and a non-democratic form of government. If we will not differentiate the difference between democratic form of government and non-democratic form of government, then we cannot understand the real ethos of democracy. Democracy is the most prevalent form of government in the world today. My dear students, you know it. And it is expanding to more countries constantly. Democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. In the beginning, I was talking that rulers are elected by the people is the real means of democracy. That's why one chief factor which is common to all democracies is that the government is chosen by the people. It also helps students to understand the difference between democratic and non democratic governments. My dear students, for the non democratic government, take the example of Myanmar, where rulers are not elected by the people. If we'll go for this Myanmar case, then it would be easier to us for clear understanding of a non democratic government. Those who happen to be in control of the army in Myanmar became the rulers of the country. People have no say in this decision. Dictators like Pinochet are not elected by the people, you know it. This also applies to monarchies. The kings of Nepal, my dear students, and Saudi Arabia rule not because the people have chosen them to do so, but because they happen to be born into the royal family. This is not democracy. This is clearly anarchy. It reminds us that democracy is people's rule. But if we use this definition in an unthinking manner, we would end up calling almost every government that holds an election a democracy. My dear students, you have to understand very carefully that every government that holds an election a democracy is not correct. Every government in contemporary world wants to be called a democracy, even if it is not so. Why? Because, my dear students, democracy has been a craze in the civilized 21st century world. That is why we need to carefully distinguish between a government that is a democracy and one that pretends to be one. Now we can do so by understanding each word in this definition carefully and spelling out the features of a democratic government. Dear students, you know that the features are the different characteristics of a definition given by some political philosophers. Or to clear understanding of this, we should go for some features. Now, I want to focus on different features of democracy. We have started with a simple definition that democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. This raises various questions. What all these are? Who are the rulers in this definition? Which officials must be elected for any government to be called a democracy? Again, which decisions may be taken by non-elected officials in a democracy? That is also the factor we should focus on. What kind of election constitute a democratic election? What conditions must be fulfilled for an election to be considered democratic? Who are the people who can elect the rulers or get elected as rulers, should this include every citizen on an equal basis? Can a democracy deny some citizens this right? And my dear students, finally, what form of government is democracy? Can elected rulers do whatever they want in a democracy? No, not exactly. Then, is a democratic government function with some limits? Is it necessary for a democratic government to respect some rights of the citizens? Let us consider, my dear students, each of these questions with the help of some examples. Major decisions by elected leaders. How the elected leaders can take major decisions and how it happens in a democratic country as well as in a non-democratic country. Country like Pakistan do not follow this rule. In Pakistan, General Parvez Musharraf led a military coup in October 1999. He overthrew a democratically elected government and declared himself the president of the country. As we all know about, my dear students, in 2002 held a referendum in the country that granted him a 5-year extension. Pakistani media, human rights organizations, and democracy activists said that the referendum was based on malpractices and fraud. My dear students, it is a matter of fact. In August 2002, he issued a legal framework order that amended the Constitution of Pakistan. According to this order, the President can dismiss the national and provincial assemblies. The work of the civilian cabinet is supervised by a National Security Council, which is dominated by military officers. After passing this law, elections were held to the national and provincial assemblies. So, Pakistan has had elections. Elected representatives have some powers. But, my dear students, it is very interesting to know about the final power rests with the military officers and General Musharraf himself. Hence, we can conclude it was not a democratic country. The same thing also happens in many dictatorships and monarchies. Thus, we can conclude that in a democracy, the final decision-making power must rest with those elected by the people. Free and fair electoral competition. The best example we are going for, that is China. In China, my dear students, please concentrate. It is very important to all of us to know about how this free and fair electoral competition is happening today and something happens in background is totally different. In China, elections are regularly held after every 5 years for electing the country's parliament. In Chinese, it is called Kangou Renmin Daibiao Daohui. That means National People's Congress. The National People's Congress had the power to appoint the president of the country. You know it. Before contesting elections, a candidate needs the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. Since its independence in 1930s, opposition parties did contest in elections but never managed to win. Now you can think that elections are there, elections are being held in every 5 years. The opposition parties also did contest elections but never managed to win. Why? Because the PRI was known to use many dirty tricks to win elections. My dear students, it is not happening in China only. In many countries in the world today, these dirty tricks are being used to win elections. And if we'll talk about especially in Chinese competition for power, then they are using many dirty tricks to win election. We get it confirmed that democracy must be based on a free and fair elections. We know it. And this is the basic principle of democracy, where those currently in power have a fair chance of losing. That means in China, the elections do not offer the people any serious choice. They have to choose the ruling party and the candidates approved by it. Can we call this a choice, my dear students? I can repeat. Can we call this a choice? No. There was no way the ruling party could be defeated, even if people were against it. These are not fair elections. Therefore, a democracy must be based on a free and fair election, where those currently in power have a fair chance of losing. And if this free and fair electoral competition will not be there, then the pure taste of democracy will not be there. Then another most important aspect of these features of democracy is one person, one vote, one value. My dear students, this is very, very important in each and every democratic form of government. Here, in this feature, one person, one vote, one value says that all are equal, irrespective of their caste, color, creed, and so forth. that all are equal in the eyes of democracy. That one person, one vote, one value says that democracy is based on a fundamental principle of political equality. You might be knowing about, and it is also exist in our country, that one person, one vote, one value. This principle has been accepted by almost all over the world. Yet, there are many instances, my dear students, there are many instances of a denial of equal rights to vote. One example I am going to put before you, I want to share that up to 2015 in Saudi Arabia, women did not have the right to vote. You think, my dear students. Again, Estonia has made its citizenship rules in such a way that people belonging to Russian minority found it difficult to get the right to vote. You see how the complex things are there in Estonia, especially for their people and Russian minority. Again, if we'll talk about Fiji, in Fiji, the electoral system is such that the vote of an indigenous Fiji has more value than that of an Indian Fijian. Now, all these are definitely not a democratic government because they are not following the basic feature or principle of democracy, that is, quote unquote, one person, one vote, one value. Then again, this feature of democracy highlights that in a democracy, each adult citizen must have one vote and each vote must have one value. Then we are coming to this rule of law and respect for rights. My dear students, you know that Zimbabwe attained independence from white minority rule in 1980. Since then, the country has been ruled by ZANU PF. That means Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, the party that led the freedom struggle in Zimbabwe. Its leader, Robert Mugabe, has been ruling the country since independence. President Mugabe was popular but also used unfair practice in elections. Now, you can understand, my dear students, Mugabe may be a popular leader, but at the same time, he also used unfair practice in elections, which is not democratic from every sense. Then over the years, his government had changed the constitution several times to increase the powers of the president and made himself less accountable. Opposition party workers were harassed and their meeting disrupted. Public protests and demonstrations against the government were declared illegal. My dear students, you might be knowing that in a successful democratic system of a government must be challenged by a strong opposition party. If there would be no strong opposition party in a democratic country, then the government will not be democratic, rather, the government will be monarchish. Public protests and demonstrations against the government were declared illegal in Fiji. But you know that protests and demonstrations against the government are the fundamental right of every citizen in a democratic country. But that is not there in Fiji. There was a law that limits the right to criticize the president. Television and radio were controlled by the government and gave only the ruling party version. This is not a principle of democracy. There was independent newspapers, but the government harassed those journalists who went against it. It's not a democratic country. Democratic government rules within limit set by constitutional law and citizens' right. We can conclude that democracy is a form of government in which everyone should be equal in the eyes of law. This is the most important standing principle of democracy, that everybody should be equal in the eyes of law. Rulers elected by the people take all the major decisions. A democratic government rules within limits set by constitutional law and citizens' rights. Then elections offer a choice and fair opportunity to the people to change the current rulers. This choice and opportunity should be available to all the people on an equal basis. Dear students, this requires that the state should respect some basic rights of the citizen. They should be free to think, to have opinions, to express these in public, to form associations, to protest, and to take other political actions. My dear students, it's very important to know that in a democratic country should be free to think, to have opinions. The individual, they should have the right to express their feelings, their opinion. They can form associations. The citizen can go for any protest against the government. All these should be there in a democratic country. These rights must be protected by an independent judiciary whose orders are obeyed by everyone. A democratic government cannot do whatever it likes simply because it has won an election. Because the government is accountable. That's why a democratic government cannot do whatever it likes. Now, we'll go for this summary definition for the better understanding of democracy. Democracy is a form of government in which rulers are elected by the people, take all the major decisions. My dear students, you might be knowing that in a democratic government, rulers are elected by the people. The citizens of the country, they are the main pillar behind all this electoral process. Elections offer a choice and fair opportunity to the people to change the current rulers. As you know, that we are having elections in regular intervals, and that election offer a choice and at the same time give fair opportunity to the people to change their current rulers. That is the beauty of the democracy. This choice and opportunity is available to all the people on an equal basis. This choice and opportunity is available to all. My dear friends, you just remember that no impartiality or there is no place of partiality in democracy. Impartiality is the principle of democracy. That's why this choice and opportunity should be available to all the people on an equal basis. Again, if we'll go further, a democratic government rules within the limits set by the constitutional law and citizens' rights. Now, my dear students, we are going to discuss some debating merits of democracy. Dear friends, another most important feature of democracy is rule of law and respect for rights. For this, we will go for one best example to understand this rule of law and respect for rights in democracy. You know, students, Zimbabwe attained independence from white minority rule in 1980s. Since then, the country has been ruled by ZANU-PF, Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front, the party that led the freedom struggle in Zimbabwe. Its leader, Robert Mugabe, has been ruling the country since independence. President Mugabe was popular but also used unfair practice in elections. Over the years, his government had changed the constitution several times to increase the powers of the president and made him less accountable. Again, opposition party workers were harassed and their meeting disrupted. Public protests and demonstrations against the government were declared illegal. My dear friends, we know that if we will have to a successful democratic government, then we need a strong opposition. But that is not there in Zimbabwe. There was a law that limits the right to criticize the president even. Television and radio were controlled by the government and gave only the ruling party's version. Now you can understand, my dear students, everything is controlled by the government. And if it is so, then where is the liberty of the people? That's why it is very much essential to understand how the things are happening in Zimbabwe. There were independent newspapers, but the government harassed those journalists who went against it. It's not a democratic country. Democratic government rules within limit set by constitutional law and citizens' rights. As we know that every democratic country or government is having a constitution, and you know that constitution is the guiding principles of a country. The country should be ruled by the constitutional law and citizens' rights. Again, if we'll go further, we can conclude that democracy is a form of government in which everyone should be equal in the eyes of law. Rulers elected by the people take all the major decisions, and a democratic government rules within limits set by constitutional law and citizens' rights. Elections offer a choice and a fair opportunity to the people or to the citizen to change the current rulers. And this choice and opportunity should be available to all the people on an equal basis. Because if choice and opportunity will not be available to all the people on an equal basis, then there would be no democratic form of government. This requires that the state should respect some basic rights of the citizen. My dear students, they should be free to think. Who? The citizens. And they should have opinions to express this in public, to form associations, to protest and take other political actions. These rights must be protected by an independent judiciary whose orders are obeyed by everyone. A democratic government cannot do whatever it likes. You know, my dear students, that though it is democratic, that country cannot do whatever it likes because it has won an election and the people or the citizen are having the right to change the government. They can go for change. That's why a democratic country will have to work within a limit. Dear students, today I am concluding here. The next part, or the second part, we'll discuss in our next class. Thank you.